Ladies and gentlemen, Zach Bell, the one and only.
They always put religion right after sex. I'm like the wet blanket. Oh, that's a terrible analogy at this moment. Okay, so my name is Zach Bell. I'm the founder of My Place, which is a global platform for sharing, and also the founder of Return, which is more relevant for today. Return's an organization I created about 15 years ago in Big Sur at the Esalen Institute, and we talk about topics like this. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics called the religion of no religion. For about, a little background on me, for about 20 years, I've been researching meaning. What gives people meaning? What creates identity? What creates community? And what are those things, and how do we define them in this weird world that we find ourselves living in today that changes every couple of years? I want to make a disclaimer before we start. I am going to talk about religion. It's a sticky word for people. Religions are really good. Religions have done things really bad. We're not going to talk about that. That's not my intention at all. I'm also going to grossly oversimplify things in order to try to tell a story in a short period of time. What we are going to talk about is religion for people who say they're not religious. So I want to start by defining also religion. So this is a definition I pulled from the Webster's Dictionary in the US. It's a particular system of faith and worship. And for the sake of this presentation, we're going to mainly refer to religion as a bucket to talk about the major world religions that we all identify very easily. Does that sound good? Cool. So the way we're going to do it, I'm going to tell a little bit of story about what this is. I'm going to tell a little bit of story about the history of what this is. Maybe ask some questions of you, and we'll ask some hands. And then why does it matter? Why does the religion of no religion matter? And last, we'll end with what can you do? Is there anything we can do? If there's one thing that I hope everyone takes away from this talk, and why pay attention to a talk about religion in an era where kind of religion's getting less and less and less, is I hope that we take away from this talk a feeling of togetherness and a feeling that we're not doing all these things that we're doing alone. So with that said, what is the religion of no religion? Oh man, I really do need the notes. It's really a little challenging. So what the religion of no religion is. I'm trying to say, we'll go this side. So I'll start with a question. I want to see a show of hands. Has anyone ever said, I'm spiritual but not religious? Or anything similar to that? Okay, cool, so it's the entire room. Do you think you're alone? Or do you think this is just this room? It turns out it's not. It's being studied right now in universities around the world for about the last 60 years as what they're calling the fastest growing religious movement in human history, and the first one that's decentralized. It has no center and it has no core. And it's so popular, actually, that it has a name. This name is with an acronym. The acronym is SBNR, and it's called Spiritual But Not Religious. There are countless papers and researchers around the world. This thing that we all raised our hands saying, I'm spiritual but not religious, is so big that it's literally a global movement being studied in universities and written books around the world. It's so big, it's actually the second largest majority of people in the United States. So these are charts that I pulled. They're a little challenging. They're Pew Research charts. A quarter of Americans, 27% of Americans, identify themselves as spiritual but not religious. There's a really interesting thing that happens there too, is those same people also think it's just them and their friends, and that the whole rest of the world has gone crazy. But actually, it's the second largest majority in the United States. I don't have data for the rest of the world. The US is really good at data, the rest of the world, not so much. But if we have data for the US, that's really good. And so if you look at the data points, it's 27% of Americans consider themselves spiritual but not religious. 47% consider themselves Protestant, which is down actually 5 percentage points since 2017 when the study was done. And then the other world religions, the Buddhism, Judaism, Hinduism, actually together make up 6%. So this religion of no religion, that's just us and our friends, is actually the second largest majority of people in the entire, potentially in the entire world, but definitely in the United States. The chart on the right, or on your right, is interesting because it shows the breakdown across gender, race, ethnicity, and party affiliation, and it's consistent. So it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, where you're from, or what your socioeconomic status is. This is a majority consistent across all the normal boundaries, which makes it a really interesting group of people because some of the other groups are really defined. So where did it come from? This is a fun story. So I'll tell a little bit of the story of the history. So it's about, the story I'm going to tell is about a 120-year-long story. And it's basically the story of, you could trace any story back to the beginning of time, but for the sake of this moment, we'll do about 120 years. And it starts with the East meets West. So everyone knows that this is going on right now. But what's really happening, in the way that I look at this, when you look at the world from the place of spirituality or from religion, what you're really seeing is Eastern philosophy and Western philosophies colliding right now. And they're grappling with trying to reconcile, how do you deal with worldviews colliding? This has obviously been hyper-accelerated by the work of people like Tony and other people in the world who are accelerating technology in the last 20, 30 years. But for the last 120 years, we've had Westerners having to interact with Eastern thought, and Eastern thought having to interact with Western thought, and it's not easy. And that tension that you feel in globalization isn't like the loss of culture. These are things that are happening, but it's really worldviews colliding and trying to reconcile what they do together. And sometimes when worldviews collide, it's not like the best, right? Like sometimes you end up with a meatball and a sushi roll, and like Italian food and Japanese food, eventually you get like beautiful like Asian European fusion, but it starts off with meatballs and a nori wrap. And so it's challenging and it's messy, and I make that joke because what's happening in the world right now is super new. I think this is iPhone 14, right? So we're 14 years into the most powerful piece of technology you've ever had in your pocket. We're only a couple decades into like really fusing worldviews together. Even now, at the opening up of and understanding cultures that we saw this morning in the Amazon and South America, these intense worldviews, like how do you do ayahuasca and then come back to your job at the insurance company? It's not easy. Like this is complicated stuff, and we're trying to figure it out. And so we're in that process. So where did the process start? So the first guy that dealt with this in a really interesting way is a guy that you've probably never heard about, but it's incredibly relevant. His name is Sri Aurobindo. He wrote a book named The Life Divine, and he's interesting because he was raised Brahmin in India, and he was educated at it was 1890. He was educated at King's College in London. So he was raised very spiritual in the Hindu tradition, and then went and got a Protestant education in England. When he came home, he published a book called The Life Divine in I think it was 1906. And, oh, look, we got notes in the second half. Thank you. I think I had that out of the heart, but anyway. And he published his book in 1906. And what it was is, I mean, you should, if you ever get a chance, it's fascinating. It's written in Old English, and it's really about the things that we're dealing with today. Like, how do you deal with Eastern and Western thought in one? Scholars have been citing this book for a long time. It's kind of the first time that this was dealt with in a really like high-level scholarly way. Sri Aurobindo, he started a town, like an ashram in India called Oroville, and today it's a city of 65,000 people. And it's one of the most global cities in India. It's absolutely fascinating. Hardly ever comes up in conversation. I'm going to fast forward, and I'm going to one of those gross oversimplifications. I'm going to skip through a whole bunch of stuff, and the next time that this really pops up in Western culture is at Stanford in the 1960s, and we're going to push back into the 40s. There's this professor named Friedrich Spiegelberg who published a paper called The Religion of No Religion, where he cited heavily a lot of the work of Sri Aurobindo. And you know, this work and this kind of Eastern philosophy and what was happening in California and Stanford in the 60s was really the thing that like pushed this into mainstream culture. And so Friedrich Spiegelberg invited some people to his course and to talk. One of those people was this guy named Michael Murphy, who went on to found the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, California. So Michael Murphy actually, to the chagrin of his family, he was actually almost disowned from his parents before this. He took Friedrich's course, read the paper, and dropped out of Stanford, moved to India, moved to Oroville, and spent 2-3 years living at the Oroville ashram. Came home to California in 1961 and started the Esalen Institute. And for those who aren't familiar with the Esalen Institute, it's a retreat center in Big Sur, California, still very much alive and very interesting today. It's where through the work of Esalen, there were a lot of Stanford dropouts. They were trying to say, what could we study if we study without the boundaries of university? And they mainstreamed in the Western world meditation, yoga, massage. They were doing encounter groups and interpersonal psychology and transpersonal therapy. And they were studying psychedelics. I mean, you can imagine what was happening in California in the 60s. Like, it was happening at Esalen. And the book about Esalen, the kind of seminal work about the history of Esalen, was literally called The Religion of No Religion. So noticing a trend that's happening through the culture that we're part of. Another guy, Friedrich, the professor at Stanford, called his friend Alan, who wasn't Alan Watts at the time. He was just Alan. He was like, Alan, you should come to California. People are going to really like what you have to say over here. And he came. And Alan Watts, everyone pretty familiar with Alan Watts? If you are not familiar with Alan Watts, I highly recommend to Google him. He's the first person in Western culture to effectively articulate Eastern philosophy or Buddhism in a way that Westerners understand it. If the religion of no religion had a guru or a pastor, in many ways it's this man. This is a photo of him at Esalen. It's quite the character. And his book, one of the first books he published, The Religion of No Religion. So we're seeing a trend of something that's kind of been really big in our culture for a long time. I'll divert from that path for a little bit to talk about something else that's really interesting, which is the Library of Alexandria, the Greeks, and the mystery schools. So the Greeks, the philosophers from ancient Greece, are the people who laid the foundation for the society that we live in here in the Western world. The classics, they wrote the foundations for the types of society that we live in. Most of those architects, writers, and philosophers were initiates of a mystery school. That photo there is the Oracle of Delphi. This is a photo of Demeter where they were doing the Eleusinian mysteries. They were forbidden from talking about these things in public. And that is a photo of the Library of Alexandria, which was famously burned and lost all of this information. There's an amazing book, I highly recommend it, called The Immortality Key, where they outline what was actually happening in Eleusia and in the mystery schools. And a lot of it was similar religion to what we're talking about today, similar spiritual practices to what we're talking about today. And the conclusion that Brian draws in The Immortality Key, or that I draw when I read it, which is fascinating, is it's no surprise that that's what we're practicing today, because we're quite literally living inside of a society designed by people who were practicing these same things thousands of years ago, or hundreds. My math is that time ago. And it's really, really interesting, and that's why people are really, broken up about this burning of the Library of Alexandria, that we've already done this before. I have a teacher that I really like, and he always says, we're on the cutting edge of 10,000-year-old technology. And the content of this conference, the things and the people that we're talking about today, is no surprise that that's what's happening. Like, we're not inventing new things. We're not inventing a religion. We're not coming up. I think Richard mentioned it in his talk. We're not, he didn't invent the gene keys. He remembered where he was from. And then the work came through. That's what we're in the process of right now. And so where is it? Where is it today? Dun, 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 dun. Well, hold on, let me show something. Sorry, 1 second. I was in French. Let me see. Hold on. I think I can do it. View presenter notes. No way. Okay. Can you do view presenter notes? I have some fun questions I want to ask. I just want to do view presenter notes. I think it's like.
What do you need?
It just says, fuck it. There's the thing that says presenter notes. I think I could try to figure it out. That's okay. That's okay. We'll figure it out.
I don't understand French either now.
I know, it's too long.
Keep going.
You have it? Oh, yeah. There it is. Somewhere in there, probably. No? Oh, okay. It's okay. I'll just wing it.
Improvise.
Yeah. Okay, so let's try to figure this out. So where's today? Has anyone here ever meditated? Okay, cool. Has anyone ever set an intention? Cool. Has anyone ever, that is where it is today. Like, we are it. It's happening. The people in this room are part of it. And there's a fun thing that happens is there's a logical paradox of getting into this club. You basically have to reject it, and then whether or not you like it, you're part of it. So the second you say the magical words, I'm spiritual but not religious, boom, you're in the club. Because what's happening in this club, AKA a religion, is all these things. Yeah, there we go. Oh my God, amazing. Here's my notes. I said all the things without even needing them. Okay. It puts you in it. And what's happening, and then what you get to know is we're being studied. So I was invited to a conference about 8 years ago called the SBANR Conference. And these are papers published from the provosts and deans of liberal arts universities from all over the West. And I was like, at this conference, what am I doing here? And then pretty soon I realized that like they were studying me. They were like, that's one of them. He goes to Burning Man. Tell us. And I was like, oh, wow, this is fascinating. Like, we're actually being studied. This is a major global movement right now. And not only are we being studied at universities, but there's books being written about us. There's a Wikipedia about it. There's studies. There's books. There's everything you can imagine. There was a huge art. This is 1969 Time magazine that took a lot of what was happening in the 60s and mainstreamed a lot of it. There's a beautiful book published recently called Strange Rights, which outlines a bit of this world and some of the things that we believe in. So why do you care? Like, what's the whole point of this thing? So when you start to look at some of the things that we do, meditation, yoga, plant medicine, treating people well, not lying, chanting, doing breath work, honoring nature, the tribal ways of life, quoting Rumi, reading Alan Watts quotes, the full moon, the equinox, seeing all things connected, everything that we do, setting our intentions, these are quite literally the actions and prostrations that are the same as that are happening in religions. These are prayers. These are songs. These are doctrine. These are ways of doing things. And these are rituals. All the things that we rejected when we said we weren't religious, we're literally doing them all. But we just do it by ourselves. It's our own thing. Totally our own thing. But it's not. They're all the same. It's so similar that there's Pew Research studies about it. There's an acronym. There's college papers, Time magazine, and posters. But the weirdest thing is we lose the most important part of spirituality, of religion. Religion helps us define ourselves. It helps us create great moments of collective action, right? Like, this is Mecca. This is a papal audience with the Pope. This is Diwali in India. To move these people, to create the art and the beauty that these cultures have brought into the world, to bring their values into the world in a beautiful way. They didn't plan on the negative externalities that they had, but they were able to do great things for society. And without that, we lose the ability to stir the souls of humans and to move people collectively together. And with that, we end up mostly alone. So I want to talk a little bit about my favorite organizing principle of religion. This is probably the easiest one to talk about. And this is the 3 tenets of Buddhism. They say Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. And these are the tenets to having a practice, right? And the Buddha is the teacher, the Dharma is the teaching, and the Sangha is the community. And without any one of those things, it's almost impossible to maintain a practice and to do these things. One of them alone isn't enough, and one of them missing, the stool falls down. Life is hard. Anybody here ever try to do anything alone? Yeah, it's like real tough, right? And these things are harder. Like 5 minutes of seated, eyes closed silence, of meditating, it's like really hard to do that every day. Like it's super tricky, and so it's not for everybody, right? Like there's these rituals that we want to try to keep, that we want to do to help us be a better person. Like I always think about Shabbat dinner. Like when am I, like, it's the most amazing ritual. It's literally stop working and have dinner with your friends. And it's one of the most pervasive rituals in history right now, and I love it, but like, I can't do that alone. I wouldn't, if I decided to do Shabbat on Wednesday, like no one's gonna stop working and have dinner with me. I mean, maybe if I go to some places, some people I know. But like, when do I know that I've transitioned from boyhood to manhood? When do I know that I've become an elder? When do I know, like, how do I know how to constrain a relationship in a way that like supports the life of a child? These are things that religion gives us, these rites of passage and these rituals. And without them, it's hard to move, and it creates a really solitary path that's challenging for most people to walk. You know, it's a beautiful path. The path of Gnosticism, like the experiential wisdom of God through your own experience, is amazing. But it's not for everyone. And that's one of the things I want to double click on a little bit. And because like we have this endless menu, do I meditate? What kind of meditation do I do? What kind of meditation do I do on a Tuesday? What kind of meditation do I do before I give a talk? What kind of meditation do I do before? When do I do plant medicine? When should I do a ceremony? When should I do Shabbat dinner? Should I meditate? Is it okay to go to Burning Man? Like, is the Oprah podcast the one I'm supposed to listen to? It's like endless, and they're like, oh, well, meditation's hard. Let me do yoga. You know, and then right before the good part of meditation, you like left it, and now you're doing yoga. And so there's no way to go deep. It's almost impossible to get that like good stuff that's on the other side of the hard thing because of this endless menu of practices. So it leads me to a really fun story that I always like to ask. This is an analogy that I got a long time ago. And the question is, so this is obviously Jesus, and he was said to wash people's feet, right? And so the teacher asks, if you went around washing people's feet, would you become Jesus? Like, does that make you Jesus because of washing feet? Or better is the question to ask, like, how did Jesus become enlightened? So that he then washed feet. So when you're doing this menu of things, are you prostrating in the same way the religions that you rejected make you do actions that you don't believe in? Or are you actually asking the questions that get you to the place that you want to get to? So how can you help? If you're watching this, if you're in this room, if you have the ability to even be contemplating this topic right now, you have incredible privilege. I don't have to tell you that. We all know that, right? This is an issue, a moment of privilege that we have. And there's the largest pandemic in the world right now of loneliness, depression, meaninglessness, lack of identity, solitude. They say the internet made far people close, but close people far. There's a lot of people alone right now. And the onboarding ramp to this thing that we're talking about, that we're laughing and joking about, is not easy. It is not easy to get to a yoga class or to get to I've been doing it my whole life. I don't even know if I'm doing it right. Like, so for someone to take a leap is a lot. And so what it's our job to do is, this is a photo, I'll tell the story about this guy in a little bit. But if you're alive right now and you're able to contemplate these things, you're pioneering spiritual identity, theological identity, personal identity, community identity. No one has dealt with the things that we've dealt with right now. And so this is Larry Harvey. He's the founder of Burning Man. And we did a conference together many years ago, and he opened it where he said, we are making possible today a way of life that people in the future will choose. And if you're alive right now, that's what you're doing. Like, no one has dealt with the technology, the connection, the things that we're dealing with right now. And so if you're paying attention to these things, it's our role to help. So find people, to get them together. Gatherings like this, done? Okay, cool. There's no timer on the thing. So gatherings like this are things that are helping, right? This is helping us define our community. This is helping make it more accessible to other people. Luik is doing a great job doing that. And so that's what I say. We have a clear set of values. Our religion of no religion that we reject, that we're part of, has a very clear set of values, right? Protecting the rainforest, indigenous cultures, protecting the planet, the environment, the resources, all the different people, no matter how they choose to express themselves. That's what we want to see in the world. Well, that is directly under attack. And so this is my last sentence, one slide, and it's never. This is a great way of building movements. And this is from a guy named Marshall Gans. He created the Obama Hope and the Change campaign. And he said, every great movement and culture has an I am, a we are, and a this is. And the I am is, what is this thing because of me? Like what am I? Because of this, do I have a personal identity? Now, if I have a personal identity, say I'm part of this religion, no religion, or whatever we want to call it, then we have a collective identity. We collectively have things that we do together. And then the last part of it is the thing that is our values happening in the world. And if they're not, it's our responsibility to combine together, to collect together, and to go help them come out into the world. So that's what we talk about at Return. That's hopefully what you'll leave here with, understanding that this is a big thing. You're part of it, and if you're paying attention to it, help bring people together, help find other people who don't have the access and bring them in. Thank you very much.